Okay, sorry, just a few minutes late, but I think we're all ready. Welcome to this Scrutiny call-in meeting. I'm just going to run round the table so we all know who's sitting around here, and others, when they come up, that will introduce themselves. So I'm Councillor Charles Wright. I'm Chair of the Scrutiny Committee.
I'm Councillor Gail Engert, and I'm substituting for Councillor Connor, who's Vice Chair of this committee.
Michael Kay, Democratic Service and Scrutiny Manager.
Councillor Tim Gallagher, Member of the Committee.
Councillor Kirsten Hearn, Member of the Committee.
Councillor Amina Ibrahim, a Member of the Committee.
Sarah Lovell, Head of Area Regeneration, the Tottenham Regeneration Team.
Helen Fisher, Director of Regeneration.
Alan Strickland, Cameron for Housing, Planning and Regeneration. And can I suggest, Chair, that people can't shout words like that from the balcony?
No, sorry. If you shout out, you will be asked to leave. It makes it difficult for us to hear the business, and we need to hear it so we can come to a reasonable decision. It's also reasonable that you hear what people say down here as well. So please don't shout out, or I will have to ask the stewards to intervene, please. Thank you.
Stephen Lawrence, Legal Advisor to the Committee.
Felicity Foley, I'm the Clerk.
Right, webcast notice, the normal notice, filming at meetings. We are being webcast or recorded, filmed and recorded for live or subsequent broadcast. Although we ask members of the public recording, filming or reporting on the meeting not to include the public seating areas, members of the public attending the meeting should be aware we cannot guarantee they will not be filmed or recorded by others attending the meeting. Members of the public participating in the meeting should also be aware that they are likely to be filmed, recorded or reported on. So by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you're consenting to being filmed and the possible use of those images and sound recordings. The Chair does have the discretion to terminate or suspend filming or recording if, in his or her opinion, continuation of the filming, recording or reporting would disrupt or prejudice the proceedings, infringe the rights of any individual, or may lead to the breach of a legal obligation by the Council. Any apologies for absence?
Councillor Connor, and we've got Councillor Engert substituting.
Yeah. Any urgent business? We can't take urgent business. We have to just deal with the one matter before us. Members, any declarations of interest? No. Deputations and petitions. We have two deputations. I don't know who wants to go first. Peacock Estate, you're going to go first.
My name is Faruk Tepeyurt, and I work from within Peacock Industrial Estate. I'm a partner and manager at Solmas Limited. We have a turnover of £2.5 million, and we won 4 national and international awards for our joinery and construction projects. But I'm not here on behalf of my company. I'm here on behalf of Peacock Industrial Estate. Peacock Industrial Estate doesn't need detailed introduction. Some of the businesses have been around for more than 60 years. The patisserie factory, for example, has been supplying all North London retailers with delicious cakes for more than 30 years. Between us, we employ 230 staff, and our total turnover is close to £10 million. All the businesses reflect the diverse and rich multicultural background of Haringey. You know, we have Turkish Cypriot, Turkish Greek, we have Jewish, we have black, we have second generation Italian. So you name it, we have it. And The current master plan is proposing to close down the estate, converting large segments of it into nice square with coffee shops and walkways. On plan, it looks really nice. When I looked at it as a constructor and joinery company, I loved it. The developers are claiming that they're going to create 200 new jobs. The proposed job figures of the developer, no disrespect to them, is not dealing with the current businesses and current job numbers. They are misleading and unreliable. The proposal needs to be rethought. It's not only damaging our businesses, it's also reflecting very badly on Haringey Council. Very recently on the national press, we already had the bad reputation, Council had the bad reputation of making a multi-million-pound concession on the Section 106 agreement, which I don't want to divulge into it. And I feel, due to the funding issues, the Council is giving more importance to the views of the developers and ignoring us, the local small businesses. There were a number of public consultations where the business community was, in our view, avoided. And we had several visits from Council's quantity surveyors where we asked them lots of questions. We emailed the Council, but we had no response, no constructive response. In our latest ad hoc meeting, where we met Helen Fisher, head of regeneration, by coincidence, she orally confirmed that the master plan might be changed. That's what was our gist of our discussion, I believe. Now, I would like to emphasize, again, we welcome the regeneration and all the improvements that it will bring into our neighbourhood. But it must give sufficient consideration to the needs of the local businesses. The Peacock Industrial Estate is a protected business zone. We would like to develop our businesses further, but due to this regeneration uncertainty, we are unable to make long-term plans. I'm unable to recruit new generation youth because I don't know what's going to happen to my business, or this gentleman is unable to buy new tools because he doesn't know whether it's worthwhile spending 50,000 K. Due to excellent position of our industrial estate in terms of public transport for our staff and access to the main roads, we want to remain where we are. But if there is an alternative plan, then we must relocate. If we must relocate, then it should be still within White Hart Lane, close to public transport, and the lease and the tenancy freehold terms need to reflect our existing terms. That's what we would like to have. And if Council could reconsider this master plan and take care of our views, we would be happy bunnies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from members to the deputation? Councillor Engert.
How many local jobs do you supply for local people on the estate? A sort of estimation, really, of the kind of local jobs that you supply.
I don't have data on hand, but I can tell from my own company, at the moment, I'm employing 24 members of staff, and half of them are local. And I believe Nick is employing mainly local. I would reckon half of the staff in the estate are local, because the patisserie shop is local. Yeah, my neighbour is local. But we can give you the exact figures within the next 14 days.
Councillor Hearn.
Have you been consulted on this plan at all?
There has been public consultation on 2 occasions, but it was mainly for the housing needs, and I believe 2, but not for business. And we had visits from council's quantity surveyors wanting to explore and do some PR work for the council, but we haven't had any constructive feedback from council yet.
So, Councillor Gallagher.
You talked about a willingness potentially to relocate if it was in the White Hart Lane area. Have you had any discussions with council officers about this? Has there been any support to that level of relocating locally?
We had only 2 informal discussions. They were not formal discussions. One informal discussion was last July with Helen Fisher, and another informal discussion was with the councillor Ali Demirci in my local Labour Party meeting. Because I'm a Labour Party member, but unfortunately, Labour Party doesn't seem to understand the needs of the local businesses. I'm sorry to say that.
So, Councillor Ibrahim.
So I suppose it's almost like a follow-on from that. Do you feel that when you're having discussions with the council, whether it's with councillors or officers, do you feel that they're making efforts to have your businesses remain in the borough? Do you feel like you're wanted in the borough, that your services are valued, and the types of jobs that you provide are?
I've got my hand on it. Sorry. My name's Nick Oliveri. I'm part of a family business that's in the Peacock Industrial Estate. I was told by somebody that's sitting around here that we do not want businesses like you in the area of White Hart Lane.
Yeah, so Councillor Anger, follow up. Yep.
So, given your reaction there, do you see the loss of productive manufacturing jobs and the probable replacement with service jobs as a sort of social cleansing of the kind of businesses you run?
Yes, I do.
Any further questions from members? No. I mean, those are good points. We've heard your points, and thanks for coming. I think it's an important voice to be heard in this discussion, and the points you make will no doubt come up in questions and discussion later as well. Thank you.
Hello, Chair. Can I introduce ourselves?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I'm Paul Burnham. We've got Phil Jackson, we've got Franklin Thomas, and we've got Reverend Paul Nicholson.
Yep, when you're ready.
Okay, the Labour Party conference last week reflected something we all need to take on board, that the bar is being dramatically raised at last about what is and what is not acceptable in housing redevelopment schemes. Jeremy Corbyn said that forced gentrification and social cleansing are not acceptable, that existing residents must have new homes on site, and that there must be proper ballots before any demolition. This present scheme does not meet those requirements for 5 different reasons. Firstly, that Lend-Lease is not acceptable as a partner based on their record at the Haringey estate and potentially with their HDV. Secondly, that this scheme falls far short of the 40% of affordable housing that we need in our local plan. There's a loss of council housing between 212 dwellings to 145. This is a loss of desperately needed homes, the type of housing that should be made available for people on the lowest incomes and with the lowest savings, and those of us in debt that's being lost. Third point is that there are rent increases in the form of service charges. 7 new service charges are being proposed for the tenants in Love Lane. These include things that council tenants in Haringey have never paid for previously, such as lift maintenance and repairs. Repairs are a landlord obligation under the tenancy agreement. Fourthly, that there is no proper right of return in place. The council tells tenants on its own website that secure tenants will be moved. In other words, that the council moves people, not that people are making informed, proper choices about where to go. And furthermore, the council is suggesting that people might be moved out of the borough, which I hope is completely inaccurate. The result of that is that many of the secure tenants have already left the estate. The fifth and final point is that the equality impact assessment that's in the documents that you have in front of you is defective. The main deficiency in it is it does not include any proper assessment of the wider area impact of the higher house prices and higher rents that are going to have such a detrimental effect. On which section of the community that detrimental effect is being felt is not present, and it needs to be there. So these are all very serious matters. This plan is social cleansing hiding in plain sight, and it should be sent back to the Cabinet for their reconsideration.
Thanks. If you let us have the meeting, please. Councillor. Thank you. Councillor Ibrahim.
So, while you were making your presentation, I think you said something, and I noticed that the officers over there were frowning and shaking their heads. So I just wanted some clarification on your what you said about the service charges. Could you? Is there any part of the documentation that, so where have you got that from? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's from the consultation that the council did in the spring about the ownership of the new homes at Love Lane. A consultation, by the way, which was a 100% rejection of the council's preferred option, which is to have housing association tenancies. So 100% vote for council housing by the tenants in Love Lane. Fantastic result.
So just to clarify, you're saying that that information was relayed as part of that consultation?
It is correct, yes.
Sorry, do you want to come back on that point?
No, I just want to speak. When he's finished, I want to speak.
All right, I wasn't aware that more than one person wanted to speak. No, you should have told us. Okay, no, right. Well, if you want to add your comments now, and then when you've done your bit, then we can do our questions going round.
Thank you very much. I live in Northumberland Park, and I was living there since 1973. Okay, and I'm telling you, my name is Franklin Thomas. Okay, and I lived at South Tottenham, and I moved down here at 1973, and I've been in the area ever since. This generalisation, but I'm pleased in warning today. Please be careful of these men. They're not very nice people. They're swimming in a big pool, right, with big sharks in there, and they do not know what's going to happen to them, and they're trying to palm that on us. I tell you what, right? I'll give you an example, right? I live in Northumberland Park, and you have a regime of telling people that they shouldn't have anything to worry about because everything is going to be all right. Nobody in Northumberland Park knows what's going to happen to them. Okay, that's the first thing. They do not know what's going to happen to them. So how could you be reassuring them that it's going to be all right? You know, you talk about Lend-Lease. Lend-Lease, you think you've got power over a multinational company who's got billions and billions of pounds. Do you think, right, that you can control them? They'll rip you to pieces. They'll rip you to pieces. And I'm warning, I'm warning the councillors today. Please take into consideration that these people, they're not in it to help the common man. They're in it to make millions and millions of money and push Haringey to the side.
Thank you. Thank you. I had Councillor Gallagher, then Councillor Engert.
Can I just clarify Paul Burnham's point about right to return? Because I think you said there was no proper right to return. The Cabinet papers say there is. So could you just go into a bit more detail about what you meant about that?
Yes. Yes, I can. The devil's in the detail here, I believe, in terms of the way that the council has approached the residents on the estate. So the new homes which have been promised are in the future. What's being promoted at the moment is for people to move off of the estate, and you can research that by going to articles like Help with Rehousing on the Haringey's website, dated the 19th of May 2017. You'll see there the language that I described that's being used, you know, move, the word move being repeated. This threat, which I think is a completely false and inaccurate threat, by the way, about people not being housed within the borough. So unfortunately, these are the verbal ways that a message is given to people to have the effect, and you can see what the effect is. Most of the secure tenants moving out. And if you look what Jeremy Corbyn said at the Labour Party conference, he's quite right to pose it that way. New homes for the existing residents on the estate. So what we're seeing then, just to finish, what we're seeing is happening elsewhere and around is that councils and developers make these promises of right to return. The reality is that people leave and they don't come back. And that's wrong, and we shouldn't be seeing that in Haringey.
Thanks. Councillor Engert.
Do you think there should be a ballot of residents of Love Lane before anything goes any further?
Yes, of Broadwater Farm. All of Haringey should have a right to vote what is going to happen to them. Because eventually this is going to go borough-wide. But I'm telling you this for a fact, right? Broadwater Farm, Northumberland Park, all the places, they need a yes or no vote what's going to happen to them. Because they don't know. I live there and they don't know what's going to happen to them. How could they come in and say, oh, we're going to regenerate you, we're going to do this, we're going to knock your house down? How could you do that? People don't know what's going to happen to them. Wait, what's the matter with you? Do you really think that? Do you really think that you're going to get any pocket change out of it? They'll rip it to pieces. They've got lawyers, right? They're on £50,000 an hour. What do you earn?
Thank you. Thanks. You made your point. Right. Any further questions from members? Any further questions from members to the deputation? If you carry on, I will have to ask you to leave if you're going to disrupt the meeting. No, I hear your point. It's not a public meeting, I'm afraid. We're going to have to ask you to leave if you disrupt the meeting. No, you made. Thank you. You'll have to leave, or we're not going to carry on the meeting. Can we? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, you'll have. If you're not going to sit down, you're going to have to leave the meeting. Yeah, can you leave the meeting? Otherwise, we can't get through the business. Yeah, go on. Any other questions from members to the deputation? No. Right, we'll proceed to. Sorry. Yeah. We do ask the deputations to go up to the public gallery now. You've had your bit. Yep. Councillor. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Councillor Carter, are you leading off? What we're going to do is take your deputation. There may be questions from members. Then going to consider the monitoring officer's report, and then the report and response from the officers on this and questions. We will at some point, I think, have to go into private session to look at the exempt part of the agenda. When we get to that, we'll move into another room to do that, and then we'll come back. carry on with the open part of the agenda. Councillor Carter. Are you going to do a double act? Because last time
I'll
I was...
use up the time that he doesn't use.
Right. Let's hope you get some. Yeah, go on.
I'll take up about 2/3 of the time, Chair. Thank you, Chair. For purposes of the record, I'm Councillor Clive Carter. I'll introduce with the main reasons for the call-in, and then my colleague, Councillor Hare, will speak about our concerns for the northern half of the site, the Peacock Industrial Estate, where we've already heard the deputation from Farouk. I will come to our reservations about the choice of preferred bidder. But first, I'd like to deal with the housing impact. The following questions recap our concerns for the Love Lane estate. You might like, members of the committee might like to make a note of these. I've got 7 questions. The first question is, who is to own the new build? The leases are 250 years to the landlord concerned, and yet there seems to be a lease-back arrangement which doesn't seem to make much sense. 2, are there ground rents? And if so, how much and to whom would they be payable? 3, there appears to be a net reduction in social housing at the same time as a dramatic increase in density. Who benefits? 4, how long will this project take? The sheer number of CPOs involved could cause delays, as we've seen at Ward's Corner. Again, this reflects the lack of engagement in bringing the community along with the council. 5, the council has a target of 40% affordable housing, and yet this scheme is only 30%. Plus, it's a council-owned site, and the council are proposing the deal. If the largest single developer scheme falls significantly short, does this target have any meaning? 6, the right of return, as Paul Burnham has spoken about, on similar terms is in doubt, and we believe that once tenants have been fully informed, there should be a ballot on the estate. 7, the 3 towers are structurally sound and have benefited from decent homes expenditure, government money. Given they contain about 180 homes, is it really essential that they be knocked down? In the surrounding area, all that's needed is some TLC, maintenance and an improved ambience for the walkway through to the new stadium. So those are the 7 questions. And now we come to the matter of the preferred bidder. I'm worried, on principle, that our council is placing so much business with a single company, irrespective of how large that company may be. It's the old advice of putting or not putting your eggs all in one basket. This is true regardless of the size and current strength of the basket. The HRW, this is the marketing term, High Road West, call it HRW, taken together with the HDV, means that the Cabinet proposes placing some £3,000 million worth of business with a single company with a controversial past. The HRW project may last more than 10 years, and although I don't expect the company to fold, it cannot be ruled out. We should remember that the mighty British Petroleum, BP, almost went bust over the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. The period over which this deal would commit the Council is long, and during which we might expect at least one full economic cycle. The company's solvency is perhaps less worrying than the likely dominating control over swathes of Haringey regeneration for many years. It seems the company drove a hard bargain with Southwark over Haygate, and we would expose ourselves to similar pressure. It could put undue influence on the planning process and generally compromise the council and its primary responsibility to residents. Although the Love Lane estate regeneration may be legally separate from the HDV regeneration across the High Road, there is still a great deal of overlap in every other way, beginning with the preferred bidder. The HDV is controversial, partly because of the principle of losing control and parting with so many assets, but also because of the choice of Lendlease as the joint venture partner. The committee may recall evidence from a previous scrutiny call-in and the objections raised about this company. I suggest this evidence reflects on the corporate culture of Lendlease, i.e., the evidence of blacklisting construction workers and of overcharging the public authority in New York, where the company had to pay damages of $56 million. Now we're told that this is all in the past. You'll probably hear this from Councillor Strickland shortly. But the past is all we have to go on, and it's our best and only guide to the future. This applies particularly to what transpired on the Haringey estate, that is a close parallel. The scandal of the dramatic reduction in social housing on that estate is well known. Haygate's the best guide and evidence that we have as to what will actually happen. Thus, the choice of Lendlease for Love Lane was always likely to be contentious, given the controversy that the HDV has stirred up. I understand the company will be an interested party in the case going before the High Court in 3 weeks' time. Given the uncertainty surrounding that and any possible knock-on effect, it would be wise not to enter into any binding legal agreements before that is settled. Finally, and given also the sheer size of this deal, I would further suggest that it would not be prudent for the Council to enter into binding agreements before the next local elections in May. Since a new administration might well wish to take a different and more cautious, measured approach to regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Is Councillor Hare going to come in? No?
Yeah. I'm just going to discuss the jobs issues, employment site, as a result of the HRW regeneration. I'm Councillor Bob Hare. Currently, the Peacock estate has some 24 businesses, from metalworking to food makers to wood machining. Despite the words in 6.28 of the report that went to Cabinet and numerous other mentions of employment, the reality is that many of the businesses of the Peacock trading estate will leave the borough. Some 30 large industrial units with good HGV access will be lost. This doesn't just mean the present businesses, but it cuts out any future possibility that the site and its buildings could provide spaces for future companies and employment. A healthy place, a healthy borough, includes employment places. Young people need to grow up with a variety of work and jobs around them. This report, or the report that went to Cabinet, is inadequate in that it talks about the numbers of jobs being created, not those being lost, nor the ancillary jobs that the present businesses support, i.e. outside the estate. It doesn't reflect the future potential of the site of this size, and it absolutely does not consider maintaining the ratio of jobs to residents. The contributions of businesses to the local economy. These are a number of sections now. There's no reference to any assessment of the present businesses and their contribution to the local economy, both directly and indirectly. Why not? London Plan. This gives equal weight to employment and housing, but the present proposals vastly overbalance housing against employment. Why? Employment spaces. The proposals for replacement employment don't provide the sorts of spaces that these metalworking and physically larger businesses, such as the wood machining business, require. Damage is also being done to future economic recovery. Once the employment land goes, it goes for good. The less employment land there is, the higher the rentals that any employment land can command, and the harder it is for any business to start or to continue in Haringey. The pressures created here will reverberate across Haringey and across neighbouring boroughs too. A total of 54 employment sites were listed in the draft Haringey site allocations document. That designation is intended to retain them as employment sites, and yet all of those sites were listed for residential development. So the question is, what is the Council doing to retain the diversity of the borough's employment spaces? The National Planning Policy Framework, NPPF for short, that gives equal weight to economic, social and environmental protection. It says there are three dimensions to sustainable development. They are economic, social and environmental. Those roles should not be undertaken in isolation because they are mutually dependent. Economic growth can secure higher social and environmental standards and improve the lives of people and communities. To achieve sustainable development, economic, social and environmental gains should be sought jointly and simultaneously through the planning system. And the planning system should play an active role in guiding development to sustainable solutions. The problem with the High Road West, that was the quotes, the problem with the High Road West proposals is that they do not meet the NPPF standard. A very large area of industrial land will be lost, completely displacing the businesses there, with little chance that those businesses will relocate within Haringey. I'm coming to an end. The question I have is, what minimum criteria have the Council set for the relocation of businesses from the Peacock estate? And final point, it's about linked decisions. The large site at 500 White Hart Lane was purchased by Spurs for the relocation of businesses for their new stadium. They found they did not need it after all, and the Council then gave permission for Spurs to profit from the conversion of the protected employment use to housing. My question that follows is, the Council must take care of existing businesses as well as existing housing tenants. They're just as important. The quality impact assessment of the businesses and the wider businesses that benefit the economy is just as important as the housing, and the Council must take care of both. And why is the Council not insisting that a similar sized site to the Peacock estate is procured and made available for the relocation of the businesses?
Thank you. Thank you. Questions from members? Councillor Ibrahim.
Thank you for your deputation. I just want a point of clarification, because I'm looking here, and what are you asking us to do? To refer it back, send it to full council? Which one? You haven't specified.
We want this to stop, and I think that the right approach is to probably send it back to Cabinet for reconsideration.
Further questions at this stage from members? No. Okay. Can I ask the monitoring officer to very quickly introduce his report?
Thanks, Chair. I intend to be very short. Chair, just a point of clarification. In the monitoring officer report, at paragraph 9.2, there is it appears that that paragraph was wrongly inserted, and if the entire paragraph can be crossed out, it can be deleted. 9.2 is on page 4. It's in the second dispatch papers. Thank you, Chair. The monitoring officer report advises the committee in respect of the call-in process and also in respect of the question as to whether or not the decision that is the subject of the call-in is inside or is whether or not it's inside the Council's budgetary and policy framework. Chair, I take it that the committee has read the monitoring officer report, and also the committee is very familiar with the call-in process and the call-in procedures, and so I don't intend to take any more time speaking to that part of the report. In respect of the policy framework, the monitoring officer's assessment is that he agrees with the position taken in the call-in, that the decision that is the subject of the call-in is within the Council's policy and budgetary framework. Also, Chair, in respect of also, Chair, the Chief Finance Officer has also taken the same view as a monitoring officer that the decision is also within the budgetary framework. Chair, in the presentation in respect of the call-in, mention was made of the HDV and the judicial review challenge. Chair, normally in these scrutiny call-ins, it's important for you to confine your scrutiny to the issues raised within the call-in. The HDV and the judicial review challenge are two separate processes or two separate entities and shouldn't form part of your deliberations, Chair. On the final point, Chair, it is important also for the committee to also prioritise the questions and the reasons raised in the call-in. I think it's very easy to actually move on to other ancillary issues, but my advice to the committee is to actually prioritise the reasons set in the call-in. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, that's noted, I think, unless there's any particular points on that one.
Can I make a quick point?
Yeah.
I think it should. I think the gallery should be mindful that obviously to have respect for officers when they're providing the committee with legal advice. Actually, so that would be really, really helpful, because obviously if we're not provided with the legal advice, then any decision that we're making will obviously be could be challenged.
No, thank you. I think it's a reasonable point. Yeah, officers are here to advise us and help us. They advise. These are officers advising the committee. Okay, if there are no more points on the monitoring officer's report, we'll come back at the end to formally take a decision as to whether the decision that's subject to the call-in is within the policy and budgetary framework. That'll form part of the decision-making at the end of the process. Right, can we ask Cabinet Member and officers to respond to the points made, and then there'll be questions. I was going to take this and then members' questions and then other members of the Council who wish to ask questions if we have time, which I'm sure we will.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to run quickly through the main issues raised in the call-in. So the first issue then is around affordable housing, in particular social housing. Now, what we've said in previous Cabinet reports is that our strong preference was to be able to re-provide social housing owned by the Council, managed by Homes for Haringey on the estate. And throughout our consultation with tenants and leaseholders, we were honest that comes with a significant cost. And we would therefore work through the process to see whether we could secure that as council housing. This is all. I should add. This is all.
If you interrupt him, then we can't hear what he says and frame. We're here to listen and to scrutinise this decision in the terms in which the call-in has been put. So if we can't hear what's said and there's constant interruption, we won't actually be able to do our job here.
Thank you, Chair. And as I say, the Council's preference for this to be council housing was mentioned in two Cabinet reports over the last 4 years, which are on the website. So we were really pleased that when Lend-Lease emerged as a successful bidder, and as part of that discussion with them, that we were able to agree that this would be we would be able to provide a significant amount of council housing owned by the council and obviously managed by Homes for Haringey in the normal way. I think it's worth just briefly mentioning the service charge. We can obviously in questions get into more of the detail, and Sarah can talk about that. But because this is council housing managed by Homes for Haringey, the service charge arrangements are exactly the same as any other Homes for Haringey block. It would be managed in the standard way. So what's important to recognise is, in addition to the 145 social rent homes, on top of that you've got replacement leaseholder homes, because we have to obviously support leaseholders as well. There are 29 social rent homes in the New Lawn block immediately to the north of the site that was set aside specifically for rehousing for residents who wanted to move. And as was mentioned earlier, on 500 White Hart Lane, the Cabinet report made clear that the Council was acquiring those homes again specifically for Love Lane tenants and leaseholders. So when you add that social housing up, you get to 203 homes. That's obviously a slight reduction in the 212 social homes that are there at the moment, but I think we're confident we've really pushed and gone a long way to making sure there's as much replacement as possible. But as well, it's important to say that there'll be a net increase in 539 homes, because as well as the replacement homes for tenant and leaseholders, there's the London affordable rent, and it's important to stress that's different to the government's affordable rent. This is Sadiq Khan's London affordable rent, and this is just a few percentage points higher than target rent, essentially social rent. So this is it's designed to be genuinely affordable by Sadiq. And then there's some shared ownership, which is pitched at the lower end of shared ownership to make that affordable. In terms of the second issue around leaseholders, we have been working with leaseholders for the last 5 years, and that included developing a leaseholder guide and the resident charter. They were agreed by Cabinet in 2014. So Cabinet some years ago did agree substantive commitments and principles for leaseholders. And as I said at Cabinet, further detailed work will be done once we've agreed the borough-wide estate renewal, rehousing and payments policy to provide even greater clarity to leaseholders on that estate. In terms of right to return, there is a very clear right to return. As Councillor Gallagher said, that's been set out very clearly in the paperwork. But of course, as always happens on regeneration schemes, it is a priority for the Council to provide tenants and leaseholders with as much choice as possible. And some of the tenants on the estate chose to move into the 29 social rent homes provided by Newlon. Other people exercised their right under regeneration to go to the top of the housing list and move elsewhere. Some people have chosen to stay on the estate and await rehousing directly on the estate. So, that really is driven by resident choice, and that's how our schemes work. But again, in question, Sarah, who's worked face-to-face with the tenants every week for the last 5 years, can get into the details there. The next question was around ownership. The call-in council's right, so there would be a long lease, but of course the council remains the landlord of the social housing, and a long lease is granted on the rest of the land, with the council remaining the freehold owner. I've addressed the next point. In terms of density, this is raised. So what's important to say is that the Tottenham Area Action Plan, which is adopted by the council, said that this area should deliver a minimum of 1,400 homes. An early master plan was done with tenants and leaseholders by Arup, the engineering company, and of course in the procurement process much more detailed work has been done. There's been a resident panel involved in the procurement, so these things have been discussed with residents on the estate as well. So the number of homes has gone up to 2,500, but of course our planning policy and the Mayor's planning policy sets limits on density, and of course these are within those limits and therefore within planning policy. And we've also worked with the London Design Council to get some independent advice on the design work. Coming on to the businesses, and these are really important questions as well. The original ARAP master plan, which was developed some years ago, which is obviously a broad master plan, suggested that it was going to be difficult to re-provide quite a bit of the business space. Now, what's been very positive about the Lend-Lease bid is that Lend-Lease have said actually, when they've done the more detailed design work, there's a lot more potential to maintain businesses. We and Lend-Lease have been very keen to do that. And that's absolutely the intention. What's set out clearly is that no development can take place, no redevelopment on the industrial estate, the Peacock estate, until a clear relocation plan is agreed for businesses who want to move or who need to move because they wouldn't fit into the particular plans that were agreed. We hope that many will be able to stay, but of course this in part depends on individual negotiations which have been going on for some years. We've obviously met businesses as well myself. Some businesses were quite clear, as early as 2012, 2013 when we met them, that they wanted to relocate, they needed bigger premises, or that they wanted to move for other reasons. So inevitably, businesses like tenants have a range of personal and financial circumstances. Also mentioned in the report is the Business Support Fund, which should be put up, and there is in place a robust site assembly strategy to set out how businesses will be supported, engaged, and how decisions will be made in terms of supporting businesses going forwards. And there are dedicated staff who've been working with businesses for some time. In terms of the CPO point that was made by the call-in presentation, as with the process for this is exactly the same as any regeneration scheme. The council, like any land owner or developer, is obviously in negotiation with people, will seek to acquire things through negotiation, and CPO is only used as a last resort. That's absolutely the way it works. Questions were then raised around the bidder. What's really important to say, and in questions Helen can answer much more detailed questions about the procurement and exactly how it's worked if the committee want to explore that. But these are two completely separate procurement processes. The Love Lane procurement process started before the High Road West one. The arrangements are different. In terms of the particular questions raised around Lend-Lease, I think we've been through those at length in this room before with regard to High Road West, and I don't want to go into all of that in detail again. All I'll simply repeat is this has been a robust and tough procurement process over a couple of years in line with EU regulations. So that Council's priorities and policies, as has been explained repeatedly before, were very different on the Haringey estate, so I don't think it's accurate to draw comparisons. Equally, and it was predicted that I would say that the blacklisting issue was in the past. That's because, of course, it is. That's a fact. There was blacklisting associated with a subsidiary company that was acquired by Lend-Lease. At a previous Cabinet meeting, this is about a year ago now, I said to the trade unions that if there was any evidence of blacklisting undertaken by Lend-Lease itself, we would look at that. None of the unions have provided any evidence to me or officers at all on that basis. And then just finally, Chair, Councillor Hare was asking a very good question around the balance between economic, social and environmental benefits and providing holistic regeneration, which is very important. Just to respond to that, so in terms of the economic side, it's important to say that the claim that all the jobs have been completely displaced is not the case at all. As I've said, there'd be significant replacement, and there would be a net increase of the estimate is 238 jobs. Part of the aim is to get a broader mix of jobs on that site. On the social side, we've talked about homes. What we haven't talked about, of course, is the new library, the new learning centre, the new public square. So there are significant additional social benefits, as well as the £10 million going into the social programme for youth activities, for training and for health projects with the community. And on the environmental side, of course, the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is there are 2 full-sized football pitches worth of green space being provided as part of this development, as well as other significant biodiversity measures. So on the environmental side, and then of course you've got the decentralised energy network. Now that's a separate decision to this decision, but obviously would support this estate. So, sorry, Chair, I forgot to mention ballots, which I should just deal with. So the Council has not run ballots. Most councils do not support the use of ballots for a variety of reasons. The estate regeneration guidance issued by the Mayor just earlier this year does not advise the use of ballots. And members may well have seen that the Labour Party Central Office, when asked post-conference about the ballot issue, made clear that mention of ballot in the Leader of the Labour Party speech was referring to the potential for consultation on introducing ballots after the election if Labour won. So the Leader's Office, the Leader's Office has clarified in the national press that the references to ballots does not mean now. It means that a consultation may be launched if and when Labour wins power. So that's just a quick canter through a quick canter through the main issues, Chair. But of course, we're all very happy to answer more detailed questions.
Thank you. I'll take questions from members. If we run round this way, I'd start with Councillor Engert.
Thank you, Chair. I've got about 8 questions. Some of I previously had more, but some of them you've responded to. The first one's about leaseholders. Isn't it evident that leaseholders are not happy, given that only 11 out of 85 has successfully negotiated with the Council? And further, if they enter into new shared equity, they will not be able to pass this on, their properties on, in their will. So that's my first question. I was going to take them in turn in case anybody else had.
Questions in turn, and then there may be supplementaries on this subject. It's easier if we do it one by one because often they get missed. And so,
Okay. So we have, as you've pointed out, acquired 11 of the leasehold properties, and we have put in place just an early buyback scheme. We've not been actively promoting sales on the estate because we want to ensure that actually we are able to retain as many leaseholders within the scheme as we possibly can. But we do understand, and at the request of the residents through the Resident Charter, we did in 2014 put in place a procedure to buy properties through negotiation early ahead of securing a development partner. So that's why there's only been 11 acquisitions over the past kind of 3 years. In terms of working with leaseholders on the equity share, as we outlined in the September Cabinet report, we have got a detailed process in place with leaseholders on the Love Lane estate. So following the agreement, hopefully, of the estate renewal and housing and repayments policy in October, we will have 3 sets of workshops with leaseholders on the Love Lane estate to work through the detail of their bespoke offer, which builds on the offer set out in the ERP, as it's called, and we will be hoping to develop jointly a policy which we then consult on later on this year, early in next year. As we have already alluded to within the consultation documents that went out early in March, we are very much hoping that there is a succession right so that leaseholders can ensure that the property is able to be transferred to a family member. We understand that we've got a bit of work to do on that, and we're going to work through in our workshops with the leaseholders a mechanism to try and address their issues.
Follow up on. Yeah, no, I was going to do.
Okay, so yeah. The management company proposed seems remarkably similar to the tenant management company that ran Grenville Tower and the properties in Kensington and Chelsea. What assurances can you give it will be equal to the task?
So officers will enter in more detail, but it's really, really important to say that this is not a tenant management organisation. The Grenfell organisation was both a tenant management organisation and an ALMO. This is neither. This is about managing public space. Sarah will explain how that works.
So in terms of the wider estate management strategy, what Lendlease are proposing is setting up a company which has representation from a number of stakeholders, so including the businesses who will be in the new development, the tenants of kind of the social housing, tenants of any future other affordable housing, and private residents as well. So they want to create a very representative estate management board who Lendlease will support and train to be able to manage the public space, estate management's charges, who will be able to set the standard of estate management that is delivered in the scheme. And then eventually that stakeholder board will be able to take over the management and Lendlease will be able to fall away. So we're trying to create some civic pride, some civic ownership of the estate management.
Councillor Ibrahim.
I was just going to follow up on that, if that's all right. So thanks for raising that. I just kind of want a follow-up question on that. Because, I mean, have Lendlease got any experience of doing this kind of thing where they're very civic and they set up a stakeholder group and the tenants have a role? I mean, it sounds great. It sounds like it's going to be like the Love Lane Soviet, do you know what I mean? But, I mean, in reality, is that really something that they've got experience of doing in the past? Because it sounds a little bit glossy at the moment.
So I'll answer one part of that and then Sarah will come in terms of the experience part. I just wanted to make it clear that it is very different to Grenfell Tower and the organisation around that. This is about the public spaces, it's not about the buildings. So let's be clear that this tenant management organisation will be looking after the parks and open spaces, the squares, etc. What they won't be doing is looking after the buildings themselves.
In terms of Lendlease experience, so obviously within their bid, they've set out examples of where they've been able to demonstrate where this type of management organisation has worked previously, and what we can do is provide the panel with those examples in the future, if that helps.
So obviously a bidder in a bid will present that, but did we go and double check on those examples, or did we just look at that and think, oh, that looks really nice? Because obviously they are, when they're bidding for a contract, going to promote themselves and say, yes, you know, we've got experience of this. But I've dealt with these I've dealt with bidders before in my day, and they do present a picture. Have we gone and independently verified whether actually they've, where they've done this, it's worked?
Okay, so we've undertaken a 15-month procurement process. We've had legal and commercial advice. We've had specialist advice from London Design Councils. And we have ensured over that 15-month process that everything that the bidders have been telling us is robust and is true. We've been able to, through 15 months of dialogue, be able to test and really challenge the bidders on everything that they've been providing to us. So am I confident that what they've provided us is true? Yes.
Right. Councillor Engert, you want to carry on?
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of mention of a steering group. Who will be the council members of the steering group, which makes key decisions, including procurement strategy, approval of viability assessments, and maintains the risk register?
It's not decided yet.
Will there be a shadow board?
No, it's a very different process.
So, when will it be decided and when will that be made public?
So post a decision about post the cabinet decision around whether or not to endorse the original decision, what we'll do is we'll put a proposal together.
You mentioned a lot of new jobs. Can you just tell us what sort of jobs those new jobs are?
So in terms of the number of jobs, so the proposal is that there will obviously be over 3,000 construction jobs that will be generated as a result of this regeneration scheme. And there will be 500 end-user jobs, so 500 permanent jobs. Just to make you guys aware that the High Road West Master Plan, the ARAP Master Plan that was agreed in 2014, assumed that there was currently around 362 jobs. So there will be a net increase in the amount of jobs that will be provided in the area. Now, there are a mix of types of jobs that will be provided, and what they are trying to do is ensure that there are jobs at every entry level. So we've kind of got entry-level jobs, we've got management jobs, and we've got jobs, for example, that are able to provide opportunities in, for example, the estate management company. In terms of existing jobs, because we are hoping to retain a number of the businesses, for example, within the Peacock Industrial Estate, we are hoping that we can retain as many of the existing businesses as possible and so retain those local jobs that the Peacock Industrial Estate mentioned earlier.
Sorry, but you didn't say what sort of jobs. Are they retail jobs? What are they? You must, if you've been spending 15 months looking at this, you must have some idea of what sort of job.
Okay, so there will be a significant increase in the amount of retail and leisure jobs. As set out in the High Road West Master Plan and following consultation, there was a desire from the community for more leisure facilities within the North Tottenham area. There is a leisure focus and there will be an increase in leisure jobs. And as I've already said, we've also tried to ensure that there are industrial jobs by the creation, by ensuring that we re-provide the industrial units within the from the Peacock Industrial Estate. So there is going to be a real mix. This is a real mixed-use development.
Yeah. So I've got follow-ups. I've got follow-ups, I think, from Councillor Gallagher and then Councillor Ibrahim.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of reference in the Cabinet report to work being done with local businesses at the moment, but that does seem to slightly contradict what we heard earlier from the representatives from Peacock. I mean, can you say what exact action you're taking at the moment to work with businesses to ensure that they can retain their business on the existing site?
Okay, so we did a lot of work with businesses. We've done a lot of work over the past 15 years. I've got a timetable here of the work that we have completed. Now, during the procurement process, there has been a focus in terms of resources on the actual procurement process. And what we've tried to focus is ensuring that through the procurement process, we essentially put into place all of the key priorities that businesses have told us over the previous 3 years of consultation. Now, those key things are that they want to remain in the area. They want to ensure that the businesses that are retained are able to stay within their existing clusters, because a number of the businesses within the Peacock Industrial Estate are reliant on each other for business and they work together. So that's something that we've tried to ensure through this procurement process. So the focus over the past 15 months has been working with the development partner to ensure that all of the priorities that the businesses have told us are actually fed in to the master plan proposals. And we've really sought to do that. And you'll see from the master plan proposal that Lendlease will present that we've really increased the amount of re-provision. And we've sought to do that in a way that allows the businesses to move from their existing location with one move only into a new a new area with new kind of commercial space, which allows businesses to retain that close-knit community that they've currently got. Now, in terms of engagement, we've got a dedicated business officer who is available to speak to businesses. They've received a number of newsletters, a number of letters from himself, and he's able to go out, explain to the businesses where we currently are in the process. We have not been actively acquiring businesses at this point in time because this development is going to be over a 9-year period. We've always said that the development will essentially start in the south of the site, so on the High Road, on the Love Lane estate, on the south of the High Road West scheme, and then work north. So we do have a number of years to work with the businesses. The businesses are not likely to be impacted for another 4 or 5 years, so we have a significant amount of time to work with them. Lendlease have also, through us pushing through the procurement process, put in place a very, very robust strategy to support businesses, including not only physical kind of human resource, but also significant amounts of money, specifically for businesses in the industrial estate, to help support them with their future business planning, with marketing. So we're quite pleased actually with the outcome of the procurement and where we've got to in terms of business support. Now, we've got a number of years to implement that now, because businesses are not going to be impacted immediately. The development is 9 years. It's not likely to affect them for about another 4.
Okay, so Councillor Ibrahim.
So my concern is you've talked a lot about what you've been doing with businesses. You've provided us with a list and how you've been kind of, engaging with them, etc. So I suppose, and this could be, this not directed at any specific officer, I'd probably quite like a response from Councillor Strickland on it. Why are we in a situation then, if all this fantastic work has been done with businesses, that you've got the people from the Peacock industrial estate shouting at you from the gallery? Because that doesn't suggest to me that that there is a positive relationship. It doesn't. I mean, the evidence that we're seeing here tonight doesn't suggest that that relationship is as you're describing it. Apologies for raising that, but it's there to see. And my other question is, when you were speaking earlier, Councillor Strickland, you said about businesses that wouldn't fit into the plans. So that, for me, kind of underlines what perhaps the businesses were saying earlier, that there is a perception that some businesses are not the right type of businesses and therefore don't fit in. So how would you define a business that doesn't fit in with your plans?
Thank you very much, Councillor Ibrahim. So, in terms of businesses here tonight, some who I've met before, who aren't happy, I think we have to recognise that in any regeneration scheme, these schemes attract a strong mix of views. There are some tenants, council tenants, who are strongly in favour, some strongly against. Equally, I've met businesses who are in favour, businesses who are against. So there is a strong mix of views, and of course we have to all, as councillors and as officers, recognise that major change like this and major proposals like this are very difficult, they are very stressful, and they can be very disruptive for businesses. And I think we need to take account of that as well. In terms of my comment about businesses not fitting, I think I more had in mind the sort of spatial realities of the area will be redesigned, and we'll need to look at what physically fits and what fits where. As Sarah said, because you've got some businesses that operate in isolation, some that operate in a cluster, and there is a desire to keep those clusters together. So again, we need to look at that in terms of the design. But as I said earlier, there's always been an aspiration, and this was in the original master plan that was agreed by Cabinet some years ago, to broaden the range of types of job in the area, and that's something we want to do as well.
So, yeah, quick follow-up and then back to Councillor Engel.
So just a point of clarification to what you said earlier. So from what I understood of the deputation, because you've said, look, you know, there is a mixture of views, so you're implying that the deputation that we heard earlier isn't necessarily representative of all of the people on the estate, but that may be true. But from what I understood, from what we were told earlier on, the gentleman who spoke was not speaking on behalf of his own business. He specifically said he was speaking on behalf of the estate. So I think you know, that needs to be borne in mind, that obviously when somebody brings a deputation, they don't do it on their own behalf. They have to have a number of signatures to justify that. So I mean, I don't think we can cast it aside as two people coming here off their own back.
It's not a public meeting. You can watch. You can. No. You can. With. The question has been asked, and you know, it's for us to determine, you know, what our views are in respect to the evidence in front of us, and the other people here are providing evidence to us and context. That's all. I don't know if Councillor Stritton wants to come.
Yeah, well, I think the point you made, Chair, is the right one, that you know, deputations to this committee are valuable. It doesn't matter sort of what percentage of people they're speaking on behalf of. There is some concern from businesses. We've heard that tonight. I think that's very important. And as Sarah said, you know, me and officers are working very hard, and certainly particularly the business officer are working hard to, you know, to understand that, to build that into the process. But I think Helen wanted to come in as well.
Yes, I just wanted to say, and I think as Sarah's explained before, so these proposals have been developed over quite a long period with both residents, local voluntary groups and with businesses. And that always creates a balance. I think in the original master plan it was quite clear that actually a number of those businesses would be relocated out of that area. I think one of the things that Sarah's worked really hard on with all of the bidders actually over the last 15 months is to find ways in which we can accommodate as many of those businesses as possible within the estate. That is not a guarantee that 100% of the businesses that are there now will either want to stay or will be able to stay, but we will work very closely with our development partner to ensure that we can do that as possible. In terms of relationship, I think we take that point. I think, as Sarah again said, officers' resources have been really focused on trying to get a good deal through the development process. We know we've got work to do in terms of rebuilding those relationships and working with individual businesses, but also groups of businesses.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. You say there's a serious risk of a legal challenge from the bidder if procurement was stopped now. Is there not also a serious risk of legal challenge from the public or another bidder if this procurement goes ahead? If the procurement process was stopped, apart from the legal challenge, are there any financial penalties to the Council?
I'll make a stab at that, but if the committee would like some more detailed legal advice, we can do that. I think we were making a very specific point, which was in response to the call-in, which is the grounds of the call-in would not be regarded as appropriate to set aside the results of the procurement process. And in that circumstance, the Council would be liable for a challenge. So having set up a procurement process over a 15-month period with a set of criteria, what you can't do right at the end of that, and bear in mind it's 15 months worth of work for the bidders as well as the Council, something like over £1 million in terms of tender costs for all of them. So if right at the end of the process you tried to introduce a completely separate criteria, then that would be regarded as unreasonable. And that would make the Council open to a challenge.
Sorry, did you want to? Did you want to come back? Okay, I mean, yeah, Councillor Ibrahim then, yeah.
So, so calm down here, Stephen. I'm not asking a question about the HDV, but if I recall, there was a previous call-in on the preferred bidder, again, with Lend-Lease, when the preferred bidder was appointed. We weren't provided similar advice there, because that was, again, at the end of a procurement process. So I'd want some clarification on that. But my understanding was at the time, and I made a number of members' inquiries around that specific preferred bidder process, was that the bidding process, that the council in its documents would have set out a clause by which it would be able to say that whilst you're going for a procurement process, if the council decides to stop at any point, then there would be a legal clause, and I believe that we identified that with the HDV, which would mean that the bidder is essentially bidding at their own cost. And ultimately, until a final decision is made, then the council can vary that at any point. Obviously, that doesn't prevent a legal challenge, but that's a significant protection. Otherwise, I would be concerned that we weren't putting those types of clauses into all of our agreements.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think the narrow point they were addressing was sort of moving the goalposts after you've got on the pitch. But I mean, we're not going to resolve the legal point now, I don't think. It's not for us to get the legal advice. It's for the Cabinet. Should we recommend that they have a fresh look at this decision, to be absolutely tight on the legal advice and on the assertions that they may be making in their papers tonight. And so, if that's the route we take, I think, you know, you've heard that these legal positions must be absolutely clear when decisions are before you. Yep, I think that covers that. Does it?
Just a minor point. I think the point about risk of challenge, again, with every procurement process, there's always a risk of challenge. And I think often what we often try and do is to second-guess the rationale for the challenge, where it all depends on the circumstances. So the risk is always there. But also, there's also a far greater issue, which is the reputational risk to the council as well. We're actually basically embarking on the procurement process, come to the end of it, and for different reasons, decide to actually abort it. That basically, so I think there is concern, at least in terms of the council's reputation, there is concern if you actually basically engage in that same type of behaviour.
Just the next one. There's mention of fixed developer profit rates throughout the course of the development. What are these? It's actually on page 47, 6.9.3. What are fixed developer profit rates?
Through the procurement process, what we wanted to do is ensure that we fix the developer profit rates for the different types of development that was going to be coming forward. So we've managed to do that to ensure that we know the type of profit that a developer is going to make on, for example, the delivery of open market sale units, so residential units. We understand the type of profit they're going to make on commercial units. We understand the type of profit levels that they would make on, for example, delivering community facilities, which is obviously very low. So we wanted to fix those rates for the duration of the development agreement so that they did not change and did not affect the scheme going forward. I can't tell you exactly what they've been fixed at, because unfortunately that is commercially sensitive.
Sorry, Councillor Gallagher.
But then what if other costs change over that period, or the schemes change to some extent? Because if they've got that fixed profit that they need to have, can they just not turn around at a later date and say, actually, we can't deliver some of these social benefits?
So, profit levels are set as a percentage. So if income and costs change, it's still a percentage. And what that percentage does is reflect risk. So as Sarah said, that some forms of development are much less risky. So things like the library centre, because we're buying that, in effect, that's our library. So the risk on that is very low, whereas open market sale, if there's a property crash, etc., that's a much riskier. So the profit levels reflect the risk of different types of development, but it's a percentage.
Councillor Engert, do you want to...
Well, I'll just do one more. There's mention of borrowing from the group investment syndicate, borrowing by the council. How much does the council expect to borrow in connection with this proposal?
I think we should deal with that in the exempt part of the report, if that's okay. Yeah. It's in terms of, I'm not going to talk to you about the level of borrowing and how much is being borrowed, but what I can explain is that the ability to use the group investment syndicate was offered through the housing zone. So as is set out in the report, we have secured circa £60 million worth of funding from the GLA, and part of that is also that we can use their borrowing facility to borrow at a very, very, very low rate to ensure that development costs are for the council and the cash burn costs of the council are minimised. All of our costs in terms of acquisition for which any borrowing would be utilised for will be 100% indemnified from Lend-Lease.
Right, further questions from members? Councillor Ibrahim.
So I'm going to move on to the numbers in terms of the housing and the replacement housing. So I did ask this in the Cabinet meeting, but my understanding is, and I know the deputation earlier quoted a different figure, but I mean, I am clear here. So you're proposing that we dispose of, or we, we'll be disposing of 212 properties and reacquiring 191. So that's a net reduction of 21 from what I understand. So how can we justify if we're kind of fighting tooth and nail with all the kind of plans that come forward to get any affordable housing, that we can actually say, well, that's fine, we don't mind losing 21 from this site, and please don't give me the answer about the 29 elsewhere. We should be acquiring that anyway. Do you know what I mean? We shouldn't be standing still. And I think for me, the importance of the 21 that we're going to lose, that's potentially 21 households that we could rehouse there, even if all of those, you know, a proportion of the people chose not to return. That would be 21 extra properties that we could, you know, bring down our housing list. So I think that's really important. So I might ask a follow-up question, but I'll let you respond initially on that. To clarify that, that includes the leaseholders. It's 212 with the leaseholders, so so we don't own all of the 212. Yeah, pardon. No, the 212, I believe, includes the leaseholders, does it not?
No,
so we are actually losing a lot more. Yes. Right, OK, I can see the officer nodding there, and I'm in deep shock.
Well, no,
because I was giving you the benefit of the doubt that it was on 21, so it sounds like the figure that the deputation quoted was correct.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, there's 212. You might say 221, but council tenancies on the estate. Yeah.
I believe that we were buying back 191.
That's right.
So is that a net reduction of 21 or 67? I need clarification on that.
Well, let the officers.
Yeah, so I'm sure this is in the report. So, there's currently 212 council social rented properties in the normal council way. What's being re-provided as currently proposed is 145 social rent. So the 191 is leasehold and social rent. There's 145 social rent. Now, you asked me not to refer to the extra 29, but that's important because No, it's not a separate thing. So, as part of the arrangement, it's not, and I'll tell you why it isn't. So, both on the Newland scheme there and the other scheme at 500 White Hart Lane, housing has been housing that would normally be allowed by the planning committee to be the general affordable rent type homes, was specifically set aside to be at social rents, which is out of the ordinary for what the planning committee would normally insist on. And in Cabinet papers was set aside specifically for the rehousing of Love Lane tenants. So the 29 homes in the Newland block and the 29 on 500 White Hart Lane have been specifically earmarked for people from the Love Lane estate, and the 29 on the Newland site, which obviously were built a few years ago, are entirely occupied by tenants who chose, Love Lane tenants who chose to move into them. And they've got, through us, a guaranteed deal with New Lawn of paying social rent. That social rent is guaranteed in perpetuity for them, basically, so they get the same arrangements. So that's what's happening with the social rented properties. But as I mentioned earlier, what's also important to say is that, in addition to that, because that's only part of just over 750 affordable homes, there is a net increase of 539 affordable homes. And as I mentioned earlier, they're split between Sadiq Khan's new London affordable rent, which is way below the government's so-called affordable rent, and also shared ownership, which is pitched at the bottom level, the most affordable level of shared ownership. So that's the mix of affordable housing.
So follow up on that.
Sorry, I'm still not clear. So I don't know if any of the other committee members are. I'm not clear at all. So my question was, my understanding was that we were buying back 191 properties. Okay. So that includes the leaseholds. Okay, and then we will go into share, and 145 of those will be for tenants as opposed to leaseholders. Okay, that's how I understand it. But we're demolishing 212, so that is for me a net reduction. But just to clarify, the leaseholders, we don't own those anyway, so they're not open to our tenants. Yeah, well...
Let's pick up the leasehold question.
Okay, so we have on the Love Lane estate 297 properties. Okay, when we started this scheme in 2014, there were 212 council tenancies and there were 85 leasehold properties. Okay, there are currently on the estate now just 65 secure council tenancies. There are 156 TA tenancies, and there are now 45 non-resident leaseholders and 31 resident leaseholders. Okay, so obviously the composition has changed. We've acquired some leasehold properties, some secure tenants have moved. But what we wanted to do through the regeneration scheme is ensure that we had enough social rented properties to be delivered to ensure that the residents could be rehoused and that we got a net increase of affordable homes at different levels of affordability to meet the needs of the whole borough. Okay, so what we are getting is absolutely 145 social rented properties. We are getting 46 shared equity properties that will be delivered and offered to the resident leaseholders. And we are then getting on top of that 155 London affordable rented properties, which are based on target rents and will, once they are built, once they are let, will be reduced by 1% per year as social rents are. So that's really important to note. So yes, there is a net loss of some social rented, but we are doubling the amount of affordable rented properties in the High Road West area.
Yeah, follow up on that one.
So I've just done a calculation. So you said 292, okay, minus the 85. Yep.
297.
297. Minus, no, I've made it as a net reduction of 67. Where's the, no, it...
there were 212 social rented properties. Yeah? When we started the scheme, there's 212 social rented properties. The scheme... That's the whole units on the Love Lane estate. So 297 is made up of 212 plus 85. So the the High Road West scheme is delivering 145 social rented within the master plan area, on top of the 29 that have already been provided. Yes, because that was within the master plan area. That's in the north of the master plan area, and they were purposely procured at social rents, and we did a deal with New Lawn to ensure that Love Lane residents could move there. So in total, there's a net reduction in 38 social rented properties.
On that, sorry, and I did say this earlier on, and I think our calculation and the deputation's calculation is correct, because New Lawn is not the council, so for us it's a net reduction of 67 council properties. That's the answer, and that's why I've said you cannot include New Lawn in that, because it's different terms. They've probably all got assured tenancies. They wouldn't have, no, let me finish here, they wouldn't have secure tenancies, because housing associations cannot issue secure tenancies, so it's not the same.
But as we completely understand where you're coming from, but as I mentioned earlier, the 29 are at social rent. They could only be occupied by tenants from the Love Lane estate, and their right to live there at social rent is absolutely protected. So that's why we're including them, because as Sarah said, they're physically within the master plan area for what we're discussing. They are at social rent, and the only people who could move into those 29 flats were people from the Love Lane estate. And it literally, not only is it within the area, but it literally borders the immediate estate that we're talking about. So that's why, I mean, it's always been included.
I think. Oh, no, hang on a sec. I think, you know, there's some debate around numbers, and I hear those points that are being made. I mean, the point. I mean, there were 212 units, council homes, and this scheme is worth what, £1 billion or something. It's going to be 2,500 homes. It's going to go over 9 years. It's going to be, you know, all sorts of opportunity and so on. I mean, what is the issue on the viability? You know, that means you can't at this stage simply say let's have 212 council homes back.
Just to start, and Helen will come in. So, what I think is really important to remember is that in terms of the things within this development that need significant subsidy to happen, affordable housing is one bit of that. So there's obviously workspace, there's the money to support community activities, there's a library and learning centre, there's a big new public square, which is one of the things that residents asked for. There's additional green space, which residents again asked for. But I can see you shaking your head, Councillor Ingram, but residents did ask for this. All went to cabinet. All went to cabinet a few years ago. So what we're trying to do with the money is actually pay for all of that. But officers have. So this is a more complex scheme than what's there at the moment, because one of the key things that came up again and again in the early consultations were residents saying we need to see more. We need to see more leisure space. We need to see more stuff to do around here. We want to see more green space, and obviously that comes at a cost. Now, what officers have done. What officers, all of this is on the website, Chair, people can have a look at it. What officers have done is pushed for the best possible deal they can, and Helen can come in to talk in a bit more detail about some of the tensions and the trade-offs that are involved in this sort of thing.
So I think I just wanted to add, actually, on the points that Councillor Strickland has been making. So again, this scheme has been developed over several years alongside the communities of voluntary organisations who have a set of aspirations which are absolutely about housing, but also about the range of other things. So if I said that we have doubled the amount of public space that's in the area, that there is the local library centre, that £10 million worth of funding will be available for social and economic support, the library centre we've talked about, green spaces, a new civic square, 130,000 square foot of commercial space, and 500k worth of investment in the town centre, and also 500k fund for events and activities, 3,300 construction jobs and more than 500 end-user jobs. That's what the regeneration scheme is trying to deliver. In terms of affordable housing, the aspiration of this scheme was re-provision of affordable housing. What the leader always said was, and Councillor Strickland, that the aspiration was for the council to own those homes, if that was possible. There was never an absolute promise at the beginning, because we didn't know. And actually, it was been through this procurement process we've been able to identify, in effect, the funding for the council to be able to buy a significant proportion of that. But let's not forget that this scheme actually produces 750 affordable homes. It's a major increase. It's a major increase in what is there at the moment.
Yeah, so I mean, perhaps I'll do it in part two, some questions about the grant and so on, I think, but I won't go into that now. Councillor Ibrahim, you following up on that, and then got Councillor Gallagher. Yeah. Yeah.
So my concern is even if I allowed you the 29 new lot on properties, ultimately that's still 38. And the issue there, that's 38 more properties than we've secured in other schemes. So when we're putting through schemes with zero affordability, okay, when we're justifying that, and then we're in a situation where we say that 38 is a small reduction, well, it's 38 times more than we're securing in other schemes elsewhere. So it's significant. It really is significant. And I think, and Councillor Gallagher asked me earlier on if I changed my view on ballots following the leader of the Labour Party's speech. But I think actually what you said earlier, for me, encapsulates some of the issues around consultation, and if a ballot's going to be done, you have to make sure that people are fully aware of the bigger picture of when they're voting or when they're being consulted, because of course people would like to see public spaces. It's like asking people if they want apple pie. You know, it's like asking people, you know, would you like a cinema? Yes, of course they would, but ultimately, do they want those things to be a replacement for homes? No, they want all of those things. And actually, we're not saying, it's not about saying to people that you can have a home but you can't have a public space. But turning around...
Question rather than a speech,
my question is that ultimately, when you're talking about these things, it brings up the biggest question of consultation. Have we done it in a way which ensures that actually the residents know the full consequences of that consultation?
I'm not sure if that was a question or not, really. So, Councillor Gallagher, I mean, there's a stack of documentation about the consultation that has been carried out within the reports. And Councillor Gallagher.
Can you just be a bit more precise about these Mayor's London affordable homes? So what percentage of market rent or rent to be charged at? Who are they for? Is it people on the housing waiting list? And also, why are we going for this option rather than going for more homes owned by the council at target rent, even if it was a slightly lower number?
Thank you very much. So the Mayor's... confusingly, they're all called affordable rent. So the government has its affordable rent, which we all agree is not affordable, and Sadiq, which is incredibly welcome, in response to, basically all the Labour Council London saying, for goodness sake, let's have a London version of affordable rent that's really affordable for real people. So the Mayor's affordable rent is set well below. Unfortunately, the formula is slightly complex. So basically what happens is the Mayor takes the target rent formula as of 2015, you'll test my memory from a few days ago, of 2015-16, that then goes up by CPI plus something until homes are built. As Sarah said, because it counts as proper affordable housing, and when it's built, the rent then has to go down 1% a year. in line with the Chancellor's requirements for social homes, and that's what the rent ends up being. So as you can see, it is slightly convoluted, but the important point is you start at target rent, so essentially social rent. There are small increases while the building is happening, and then the rent goes down 1% for 4 years in accordance with the Chancellor's requirements. So that is slightly confusing. It's not our fault, that's what the Mayor's done. But what you can see is the starting point is a social rent, and it goes up a little bit before going down a little bit. That's way, way, way below what an 80% government version social rent would be. On the GLA website, there's an indicative, but it's just indicative, unfortunately. There's an indicative table of what they expect rents to come out as, but they're designed to be affordable for people from the mainstream council waiting list who would normally be allocated to social housing. That's what the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor for Housing has designed the product for.
Yeah, thanks. Further questions from members on the London, the Mayor's figures?
Yeah. So I just want to understand. So the problem with that is, if it took a long time to build, then obviously it would go up higher. If it was built quickly, then it would start going down, wouldn't it? So doesn't that isn't there issues of the longer you take to build and sitting on land, etc.? I mean, you tell me. I think the grant is secured against a fixed timetable, if I'm right. Yeah, and the grant will. Yeah, so it's not money into the air, on that one. Any other questions from members at this stage? Councillor Gallagher.
So my understanding of what happened on the Haringey estate is that at this stage in proceedings there was some level of affordable housing promised, and that changed later on when it came to planning stage, because the developer came forward with a viability assessment which says that they couldn't produce that level of affordable housing. Is there anything in this to stop Lend-Lease doing that here? Could they turn around at planning stage and say, actually, we can't give you this number of affordable homes?
Absolutely. We have got mechanisms in place to ensure that we get at least 30% affordable housing. So just to make the general point, actually, I think that we're losing focus. So the amount of affordable housing that is actually within the development agreement is a minimum. So it's an absolute minimum. We have said contractually you have to agree to deliver a minimum of 30% affordable housing. So, through the planning process, the Council will inevitably seek to maximise the amount of affordable housing that will be delivered. The reason that we wanted the minimum of 30% affordable housing put within the development agreement is so that we can stop things like what happened in the Haringey happening, so that we can ensure that it's a core requirement within the legal documentation, a condition of us transferring that land to the developer, that we will secure 30% affordable housing. It is also worth noting that the Council, as landowner, also has the ability to sign off the planning application before it even goes into the planning authority, so that we can be comfortable as a landowner that we are getting the minimum levels and hopefully more of affordable housing that we are seeking to achieve through this scheme.
No, I think so. You want to come back on that?
Just very quickly as well, also to make the point that, remember, as was mentioned earlier, the Mayor of London is putting £60 million into this scheme. There's also a contract attached to that. So if Lend-Lease did attempt to really row back from what was happening, as Sarah said, there'd both be a contractual problem with us, but also the Mayor would say quite rightly, hang on, I'm putting £60 million into this, and a decent chunk of that is to pay for affordable. So Lend-Lease would have to face the Council and the Mayor's lawyers if that was attempted.
Okay, I want to go into a private session at 9 o'clock. I'll take 10 minutes worth of questions from members. So, Councillor Brabazon was showing, Councillor Hare, Councillor Tucker. Do you want to come up and, quick as you can, please. We've covered quite a lot of ground already, I think.
At the Cabinet, I asked you about the ownership of private land. Page 65 of the pack has the map. It's hard to see it because it's not in colour. However, what it shows in the High Road West area is the division between publicly owned land and private land. So my first question is, how contingent is the private land on this scheme, the privately owned land? You also told me at the meeting that 13% of that land is owned by Spurs. So how can I phrase this? Do Spurs presumably have known all about this scheme, so you will know when they assembled their land. And it is noticeable that in 2 hours the word Spurs hasn't even been mentioned, even though this scheme provides them with their walkway and all the rest of it. So will you be having to buy land from Tottenham Hotspur in order to make this scheme happen? And if so, has it occurred to you that they, of course, are excellent businessmen and no doubt will require a premium price for that land? Have you considered that in the costings of this scheme? That's the first question. Second question is paragraph 511. I don't understand how this is going to work. I'm not one of I don't indulge normally in late-stage property speculation. But it says here, the council will remain the landlord of the social housing. So how will that work if Lend-Lease, if the land is transferred to Lend-Lease when people are moved, they become the leaseholders of the land and presumably build the flats as the development partner. How will it work that the council is a landlord of social housing in relation to service charges and all the other things that will go with living in private blocks, which then comes to another question of if people have to pay service charges, how can they be going back on the same terms and conditions? So I just don't understand how all this works. And if someone could explain it to me, I would appreciate it. Because if I was a tenant in Love Lane, I'd want to know all those things. The next question is about tax. And again, I raised this at the Cabinet and I got some sort of answer, but I don't really understand it. But Grant Thornton say that there are some real worries about stamp duty. So, and in all these deals, and other tax liabilities. So can you reassure us that we're not going to be charged huge tax costs that haven't been costed in? The other thing I want to ask you is, what is the status of where we are now? The Cabinet agreed that Lend-Lease would be a preferred bidder. Has any documentation actually been signed? Okay. Or is there going to be another process similar to the HDV where all the documentation will be brought to the Cabinet as much, I hope, as possible in public, including the development agreement that you've been talking about, because I assume that is similar to the member agreement with the HDV, where, of course, we found some serious flaws. So I would... Okay, so has anything been signed? Yeah. What's the legal status? Yeah, you've when will we see the paperwork? Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll deal with those, and I'll take Councillor Hare.
Yeah, thank you very much. So sorry to disappoint, but obviously the answers to your questions haven't changed since Cabinet, but obviously we can go through them again. So we shall see. So in terms of the first one, private land, so yes, this is contingent on as we said earlier, on acquiring private lands, obviously a variety of owners, as you know, from the map and as we discussed at Cabinet. In terms of the 13%, which Helen talked about at Cabinet, which is owned by Spurs, Spurs would be treated like any other landowner, so we would enter into negotiations, seek to acquire that. And of course, if Spurs are not willing, if we can't reach a reasonable settlement, then as with any other landowner that we can't reach an arrangement with, the council would then look to use its compulsory purchase order powers. And that, of course, is then done on the basis of an independent evaluation. So the council would not settle for unreasonable demands from any landowner. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who they are. And then if I bring in Helen, so you asked specific questions around freeholds and leaseholds around social housing. Helen could rehearse the tax issue again, and then the sort of where are we now, what happens immediately after this.
So I'm not fond of the tax issue. I'm really not fond. But basically, when you sell land, there's a tax liability. So the way that this is structured is the council wants to own the freehold because that gives you power over the terms of the leases as they go out. So it gives the power some control going forward if you do that. But what that means is that we potentially buy a property and then we give a lease to, and then we give it as a lease to the preferred bidder, which means that potentially there's two tax liabilities because you're transferring property from here through. So the Grant Thornton advice is basically you need to sort that out so we can minimise the tax liability on all parties, actually. So it's horribly complicated. And if you do want a note, we can do you a note. So it's called stamp duty land tax. So it's SDLT. So it's how that flows through a scheme. And what we want to do is just minimise the impact on that. In terms of your question around how is it actually going to work in terms of the social housing, that's not settled at this point. So Cabinet has only just made the decision, obviously going to review that decision to purchase the council properties, And so there are now a number of choices. So what you could do is say we want a single block that has all of the council properties in it, which means Homes for Haringey will manage those on our behalf, and the council has complete choice about how it deals with the service charge issue. I suppose the issue with that is that a good thing, just to put all of that in one block, or do you want to give people options around kind of moving across the estate, for example? So if you think about the northern part of the estate, which is by a park, so it's still to be decided. You're right that those choices then may have an impact on things like service charges and the affordability and the management arrangements, and that will be taken into account in terms of those decisions.
Raises the whole question about this right of return on the same conditions, because even to the most untutored person listening to that, you have already fundamentally said, well, it's not really the same, because we've already said, yes, there will be service charges. There's the issue of who owns. Lend-Lease will own these buildings. We are giving, as I understand it, the land in this development agreement. We are going to pay presumably all the costs for the decanting, and then for people being moved off. Then we will transfer or sell the land for some receipt from them. You have a development agreement about who does what. They build the flats. They own them. And so even if Haringey then buys them back, it sounds to me like Lend-Lease just laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, so just do you want to... Yeah, answer that.
So just to go back on the service charge issue, residents currently pay a service charge. Residents will pay a service charge in the future. So I've got the service charges in front of me on what the Love Lane residents pay. So we know what the Love Lane residents currently pay. Now, earlier, within the deputation, there was a reference to the council increasing the amount of service charge that will be put on residents. That's not the case. What the document actually asks is, what are the most important services to residents? And we ask residents to prioritise them. Now, the reason that we want to do that is because involving residents in the development of service charges is really important to us. And as you will see within the Cabinet report, we have committed to working with residents to work through the service charges to ensure that, A, we provide them with the services that they actually want, and B, that they are affordable. We are committed to working with the residents and Lend-Lease to ensure that the design of these new homes designs out unnecessary costs, but that residents have an affordable service charge. It has been on our radar for a long time. The residents on the Love Lane estate, the RA, know that we will be working with them on this, and that is why the consultation earlier in this year specifically sought their opinion opinions on service charges, so that, as set out in that consultation, we could talk to them once the developer was on board. That's kind of the process. We want to work with residents. It's really important to us that we meet the commitments that we set out in the Resident Charter, one of which was they will not be financially worse off.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to come in, yeah.
Just very quickly, I think it's important to remember that in law, service charge can only be charged on cost. And this is why the conversations Sarah is talking about are not, they're not fluff. They're genuine, very important conversations, because if residents said, so for example, a big problem on the Loveland estate throughout all of this, and it remains a problem, I was there last week talking to some tenants and to the staff there, has been security and antisocial behaviour. So for example, if tenants said, in the new blocks, we want proper concierge staff, obviously they would have to bear the cost of that in their service charge. So there are choices for tenants about exactly what sort of services they want, but because those services are charged at cost, that has a direct impact on the service charge. So that's why there has to be this consultation, because we genuinely need to understand what residents' priorities are. We then cost that up, and there'll be an iterative process of, well, if you wanted that, it would cost this much, if you wanted that, it would cost this much, and then we would come to a settled position with tenants on that basis, basically.
I'll take Councillor Hare's questions. Quick as you can.
My main focus has been on the businesses, and you talk about a 9-year development period. Now, if you acquire the property that the businesses are on, at the start of that period, there'll be a continual loss, just simple turnover, and the fact that businesses may wish to try and make moves before that. There will be a loss of businesses from that estate. And it seems to me that if things worked out well for you, you might say, that you might only have to deal with half a dozen businesses or whatever remained at the end of that 9-year period of uncertainty and all sorts of other factors. I would want to see that those premises, which are of a very, very particular type, and the businesses which are diverse and valuable, as I see them, retained in the borough, providing jobs, services, and all the ancillary jobs and services that go with them. In other words, I wouldn't want to see an attrition that made life easier for you. What I want to see is those businesses...
Question, please, Bob.
Well, that is the question. Yeah. The question is, is this what will happen? In other words, most of them will end up simply going and not having to be replaced by you.
I think it's just worth reminding everybody about the High Road West Business Charter, which actually sets out our commitments to businesses affected by the regeneration scheme. So it sets out commitments around how we are going to seek to support businesses in terms of A, relocation within the scheme, and B, relocation within the borough. What we do not want to do is lose these businesses from the borough. What the Charter also does is set out our commitments in terms of how the valuation process will work, and sets out our commitments in terms of additional support and advice we will give them. It really is our aspiration, as we've already tried to explain, and what we've tried to do through the procurement process, is to retain as many of these businesses as possible within the regeneration scheme. I think there's a misunderstanding if you think that we're going to just wait and not talk to anybody for 9 years, hope that some people will move, and then just deal with 12 businesses at the end. That's not the case. We'll be starting a detailed engagement process with the businesses as soon as we have Lend-Lease on board and we have their resources, their financial resources and their human resources to go out and have those detailed conversations with businesses to understand their needs.
Okay.
Those needs, those aspirations will fit into the master plan.
Yeah. No, I think we got that point. I mean, you mentioned phasing earlier. I mean, would it be the intention to acquire assemble the entire site on roughly day one, or obviously not day one?
No, so the development will be delivered in phases, and there's 4 or 5 phases that will be delivered. And what will need to happen is we'd need to secure vacant possession of a particular phase. That phase will then be built on, and then that will offer opportunities for people in the second phase to move into that phase. And that's how the development will be delivered over the 9-year programme.
Yeah, good. So, Councillor Hare, further point.
Just a very quick question. You've got various places and classes of the social tenancy. In other words, some in new lawn, some in new development, some where people will move back. Are the numbers you quoted, i.e. the 29, whatever, 145 elsewhere, are those numbers absolute, or could they change because, for example, the tenants who are currently in new lawn or first move in move out, and they no longer are needed in the new lawn block? Or will they stay in perpetuity as social tenancies in all the different places?
Yep. So as Officer said earlier, the affordable housing numbers are written into the documentation, and they're all minimum numbers. So we would expect to see at least that, and of course through the process we'll be pushing for more, either through the scheme itself or pushing to get a bit more grant off the Mayor. You know, whatever we can do to push the numbers up, we will certainly try as best we can. And just to say as well that in terms of the business charter, just to remind members that that was agreed by Cabinet in 2014, so it carries the weight of Cabinet, and that was part of the procurement process. So bidders had to explain how they would deliver that charter.
So, Councillor Tucker, you've got a couple of questions. Then we're going to go into private session, I'm afraid.
Yes, I've got 2 parts to my question. So firstly, if we can clarify, we haven't signed anything yet, but apparently we're dealing with the kind of people who we're afraid that if we take certain decisions about how the process operates, are going to take us to court and sue us for millions of pounds. And I'm wondering why we would appoint as our preferred bidder the kind of organisation that we would be afraid, and it's said here, is going to take us to court. Which leads me to the question, when are the actual contractual details going to be brought out into the public? So when are we going to see them? Leading on from that, we've come down from our target of 40% affordable to 30% affordable in order to make this deal. And within that, let's see how it's constructed and who's paying for those affordable flats. We have 145 that are going to be council flats. We're paying for them. We have 155 affordable rent and then some shared ownership flats. We're paying for them. It's taxpayers' money via Sadiq Khan's 60 million that he signed off. We're going to have a library, we're going to have open spaces, we're going to have parks. Apparently, we're paying for them. Not Lend-Lease, we're paying for them. Where does the money go from the flats that are going to be sold or rented at full market price? Not to the council, to Lend-Lease. So my question really is this. Would somebody please explain what we, the public sector, what Haringey Council, the people of Haringey, are actually getting out of this deal?
Thank you very much. I think it's a gross exaggeration of what's going on to suggest that we're terrified of Lend-Lease and they might sue us sometime next week. That's not what's being discussed at all. And the earlier discussion on risk, I'm not sure that was said. In terms of signing the final contract, that would happen in the next few months, assuming Cabinet makes a further decision following the outcome of this evening. We do have a 40% target, that's absolutely right. And of course, we try as hard as we can to get to that. And as I said, the 30% is a minimum. Obviously, we would hope to be able to push that up because, of course, we would like that to be higher. In terms of suggestions that we're sort of paying for everything, can I bring the Director in? Because I think that misunderstands how these things work.
Yeah, sorry. So if you think of it, so the council is on a phased basis disposing of its land, and in return for that land, what it wants to achieve is a series of benefits for local people and for the area. And those benefits will be affordable homes, new public space, a library and learning centre. All of this comes from the value of our land. So that's the deal, as it were. So what the Lend-Lease part of the deal does, so we put our land in and we say, we're only going to sell you our land if we get all of these things that we've asked for. And we know what we want because we've done years of consultation with local people, so we've got this list of asks, and that's what the procurement was. What the Lend-Lease does, what the preferred bidder does, says, okay, on the basis that you want all of these things, we've got to pay for all the construction, we've got to pay for all of the financing costs, and therefore we'll give you all the things that you want, plus we'll get a cash receipt. And it was that cash receipt that enabled us to say, actually, we don't want a housing association to buy all the affordable homes. We can use part of the receipt that we were going to get to buy those homes for the council. So, you know, there's two parts of the equation there.
Councillor Ibrahim, last comment.
Sorry, but just a clarification. At the moment, we own them anyway.
Yes, we it's a fair. So what you get in replacement is 750 affordable homes going back to the community. What you get is workspace. Brand new facilities, public realm, leisure facilities that people wanted, improved station.
Can I just clarify?
No.
Please.
I think we've gone round. It's 9:15.
Can you please clarify in your private session whether all these facilities are public or privately owned?
Sorry, into private session, and then we'll return. And is that agreed that we go into private session? Agreed? Yes, thank you. Okay, we're going to reconvene in open session. There's a few things to get through. In case we run over 10 o'clock then, I think, do I need to waive standing orders now in case we run over 10? So is it agreed we waive standing orders so that we can continue after 10 o'clock, which we may have to do? We need to formally address the question of whether this decision of Cabinet was within the policy and budgetary framework in accordance with the recommendations of the monitoring officer that it was. We agreed then to accept that it was within the framework. We have three options: to take no action, or to, in which case the Cabinet decision stands, or we can refer the matter back to Cabinet for further consideration, or we can refer the matter to the full Council. If we refer the matter, we can make various recommendations to assist further deliberations. Is the proposal that we refer the matter back to Cabinet? Agreed? You've proposed and agreed. And I think, and I don't have the absolute wording on this, so we will have to firm up the wording exactly. On what? On? I just said agreed. I said, is that agreed? Agreed. Yeah. So it's agreed. We refer this matter back to Cabinet. The three specific areas which we would want to draw to Cabinet's attention are the question of full replacement of the numbers of council housing going forward.
Yes, the 1, 2.
Yeah, 191. Well, 212. Yeah. And I say we'll firm the wording up, the precise wording up on this. The second point was about leaseholders, engagement with leaseholders, and I think there's some concern that there needs to be more work done with leaseholders to engage and to satisfy the reasonable expectations of leaseholders, and that work needs to be set out more clearly. Steps need to be taken to ensure that that is the case. The third point is about the businesses,
which is our biggest concern.
Which I think is probably, with the council housing, is one of the biggest concerns. I think it's the text in the reports was vague on precisely the work that either has happened or is to happen with businesses, and we took cognizance of the deputation. We noticed hadn't raised those points before at Cabinet, so it's an important. Yes. Yes. So the aspirations which do appear, need to be fleshed out so that it's a lot clearer. It does talk about retention, but so that we are looking for retention of those businesses and support. Well, you can't really, and I'll have to clarify this wording because at this time of night I haven't got the exact form of words, but on those 3 points, can we agree then to...
Agree. Yeah. You can't afford to lose a job in Haringey.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, subject to their own. We agreed on that. On those 3 points, we agreed to refer this matter back to Cabinet. Yep. Agreed? Yep. Good. Have I got anything else to do?
Thank you.
That is it. Yeah. Thank you.